Good afternoon, Miamians. I'm Molly Young from the Miami University Alumni Association. And today, as part of the Alumni Association's webinar series, we present What is AI? This talk is presented in partnership with Miami Online as a complement to their virtual micro learning series on AI. You can also participate in the free online webinars and additionally choose to participate in Miami Online's AI Fundamentals Micro Learning course. There is a charge to that, but you can earn an AI badge upon completion of that program. You can find out more by visiting professional.miamioh.edu. And joining us to tell us exactly what AI is Associate Professor of Communication and Design, Dennis Cheatham. Welcome to you. Thank you for coming back and joining us today, Dennis.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be here with all of you. AI is right. The buzz we've been hearing so much about, it's just fun to share.
Awesome. Well, I just want to let the live audience know that we had several questions come in during registration, and we're going to try to cover as many of those as possible. But also, should questions bubble up while you're watching, you can submit questions or comments or feedback during the webinar by clicking the Ask a Question button under your video. So, Dennis, I'm going to turn it over to you. Tell us all about it.
Great. Thanks. Thank you so much. So I have been teaching a course in generative AI here at Miami for a few years, and I was a practicing designer as interaction design, designing websites, services, brands for about 15 years before I began my academic career. So always been interested in how technologies are going to impact the way we work, the way we learn, and AI is one of those that's affecting everything. So I'm excited to get to share some of that with you. So let's first back away and see what's out there. What can AI do? What are a few stories? And I want to share a few of these with you. So here's an example of old tech plus new AI. This is in New York. Metro rail workers have been using Google Pixel cameras, Google Pixel phones, and then combining that with an AI tool and are identifying issues in rails where maybe the rails are a little bit compromised or some concerns where repairs might need to be. They've been using this tool while surveying the rails with a 92% accuracy to identify impurities and issues that they could go back and repair later. Amazing example of how a tool, AI tools that identify patterns, can really make a significant difference. Another example here is watching for heart attacks. Researchers at the University of Mississippi recently have developed some AI technology with smartphone or smart watches. They have been able to identify 92.4% accuracy of someone in real time if they're having a heart attack. So if you have a loved one who's ever experienced a heart attack, and hopefully yourself has not, you know seconds matter. You know it's significant to identify if someone's having this kind of episode. This tool, combined with the AI, so smartwatch combined with AI, is identifying in real time to get care quickly. That's saving lives. And another example is my own. I recently started playing Baldur's Gate 3. If we have any gamers out there, you know what that game is. And I used AI to help me get to know the game and develop my character and get to wade into that world. So just a few examples of the way AI can be used to save lives, to identify issues, make our lives easier, and add a little bit of fun. So there's so many uses. Where does one start? So I'm going to go pretty basic ground floor on generative AI and some of these tools to introduce you, because there's so much buzz about now infused with AI. It's sometimes hard to know exactly what these tools do and what they are. So here's a quick primer. First, let's talk about a few generative AI concepts. So generative AI, this term, kind of embedded in the term is it generates. These tools create, they produce. So ChatGPT, very common tool. A lot of us have heard this one. A tool that is multimodal. So a multimodal tool will create images, it'll create text, it'll create a variety of outcomes. Here's a screenshot from some work I've done with GPT in producing code. So GPT is also complemented, or another tool like GPT is Claude. I like using Claude as well. I do a paid version for that one as well. It's not multimodal, so this one's not creating images, but it does still produce code and other outputs. An example of some of my use there. So these tools, these generative AI tools, are trained, and when they produce results for you, when they put those words up that are showing up in their response, they are essentially predictive tools. They're predicting what word comes next in response to your prompt. Now, that's a super simplified example. I'll give you some more examples as we talk more today about how that process works. Also, there's Gemini. So Google Gemini is a pretty common tool. DeepSeek, you may have heard of this one. Um, Perplexity, which is really focused search engine and heavier on search that's augmented with AI, but a great tool there. You may have heard of Midjourney. It's an image only tool, so a little bit more specialized, as well as some of these other tools like Sora and Runway that create video images only. So there's a range of tools out there. It can be pretty confusing on where to look. I'll give you a resource in a second, but I want to tell you about some specialized tools. These do very specific things, and creators are producing tools that do some really interesting stuff. For example, this is one you may want to try out, though you also might have a hard time sleeping at night. It's called They See Your Photos. Um, Fascinating website where you can upload an image, and it just blew my mind. I uploaded an image when I went to a concert in Indianapolis, and I just had this blank background behind me. But the tool was able to tell me first, like where I took the photo, what was going on, and then it began to anticipate like what my income level was, if I was friendly, if I voted conservative or liberal. So yes, it's kind of a broad brush to paint with a tool like this, but it's interesting look at how these tools try and make assumptions and conclusions based on the information they're given. If you subscribe to the pro version of ChatGPT, you know that there's also an advanced voice mode. Kind of putting this in the specialized section, advanced voice mode is fascinating. One thing I think it's interesting, first, it's just like typing back and forth, but when you speak to the AI, and the voice is quite believable. You may remember there is some legal concerns about voices and people's voices being used for this tool. You can interrupt the tool when it responds to you. So in a very natural way, I can talk with the tool, and then while it's giving me a response, I can stop it. It's like, okay, great. I know that's interesting. Now, what you just said there, let's dig into that. And it will pause and dig into those next results. Really fascinating technology. I want to tell you a very specialized tool here. It's called Exactly.ai. This is a group of artists who oftentimes, like in the arts community, I'm in the College of Creative Arts, like our work is being stolen, our work is being co-opted. There are real concerns about authorship here. What artists did here was they took their own artworks and trained a model on their art. And you can subscribe to Exactly AI, and you can create your own art based on and infused with these artists' actual work. Essentially, artists saying, I have a style and I create a certain way. The world may want to create like I do. I'm going to create a model that's trained like me so you can create in my style. Really interesting take that's kind of different from the Studio Gimli stuff we saw a few months ago with ChatGPT. If you know about that one, that explosion and using a style, and everybody was riffing on that. This tool called Crystal, and Artie Kuhn, if you're out there, I hope you're having a great day. One of my great friends. This tool called Crystal allows you to log into LinkedIn and bring up someone's profile. And there may be some cringe here for you. It will assess that profile and then compare it with your content, and then give you guidance on how to interact with this person. So it's geared towards sales. So if I wanted to cold call someone, then I could bring up their profile, and Crystal would say, you align in these ways. Your impression of risk seems to be very different. When you talk with this person, make sure you ask them about their family and personal things first before you get into business. So these tools are scraping or assessing the content in someone's profile, and then making judgments and then telling you, here's how you should approach this person based on the information at hand. It's a crystal interesting tool that I've worked with students before, and we've been on both sides of like, this would be helpful for me, but this is also really concerning. Then Canva, if you use Canva, there's AI tools built into that that can assist your work. And then HeyGen allows you to take text, input text, and then an avatar will speak that text. So essentially, it is your text with an AI actor voicing all of that. There's all kinds of implications there when we think about um, authenticity and if our words are now being put into someone that does not exist and if we can trust what we see. So if during our talk today, there are moments when you're thinking, I could see how this could go off the rails, you're in the right spot because there's some wonderful implications and some interesting and concerning futures. So here's a website for you. If you want to look up a whole bunch of tools, this is the best catalog that I found. Futurepedia.io, great resource for exploring lots of tools that are very specialized, as well as some of those tools that are going to be maybe you've heard of before that you'll want to explore a little bit more. So another term that's been really hot right now that has emerged is agentic AI. So traditional generative AI, like we've all been using, I input my prompt, I ask it to do something, and then it cranks it out for me. Agentic AI is a very different kind of thing. So very briefly, think about agentic AI as I am now asking or I'm trusting my AI agent to go out and do stuff for me. The best example I heard of this was for some researchers at IBM, and I had a fantastic video on YouTube where they said, so if I'm an actor, I would hire an agent and I would not tell that agent, I want you to go to this casting and do this for me and come back. I would trust that agent to act on my behalf. So when you see agentic AI, we're talking about AI making decisions and going further and taking steps on your behalf to do those tasks. Really interesting implications with a tool like this. So if you've heard of this video, you know, when you saw that word pop up, you know what I meant, gibberlink. I'll tell you a little bit about it. There's a video, I'm not going to play it today so we can save some time, but let me tell you about the interaction here. There's this video demonstrates how on the phone is one AI agent, and then on the computer is an AI agent that's at a hotel. In this back and forth, the phone is like, hello, I am working on behalf of this person, and I'm looking for a venue for a wedding that they want to host. And then the computer answers like, oh, hello, yes, I can help you, and I'm an AI agent too. Would you like to switch to Gibberlink so we can have faster, more quicker and easier communication? And then all of a sudden, if you watch the video, the phone just kicks into like beep, and then the computer beep, communicating with another in tones that we cannot understand. If this is the stuff of science fiction for you, yes, that's probably about right. So agentic AI, I learned about this at OpenAI developer community where developers are digging into like, what does this mean for the future? And I love this post by mat.eo user. There's like, I believe there's some work to be done, provide some immediate benefits, and it aligns with my Star Trek visions. So as a Trek fan, that meant a lot to me. And I kind of want that to happen. Then again, if you've watched enough Trek, you know, things go wrong all the time with computing. So agentic AI working on your behalf, that's what these tools can do. And there's some interesting developments that are happening in that area. So training data, you may have heard this concept hearing about how AI is built. All of these models are trained on something. They're trained on content. And there's been a real concern that, for example, the New York Times trying to protect its content and concerns that these models, that different companies are scraping that content that is copyrighted, that is protected, or that has been developed by humans that should not be used for training. So in many of these models, we don't know how they got the content to train the model. So that is the truth of the matter. Some models that individuals train, they train it on their own stuff, kind of like how those artists trained the model I shared with you at Exactly AI on their work. One thing I want you to remember here as you're using these tools, if a tool is trained on content, the broad set of knowledge, this image I created with Midjourney 3 or 4 months ago, whatever it's trained on is what it's going to produce and what it's going to know or be able to produce and how useful it'll be to you. So if it's trained on 1980s catalog of pop tunes, it's going to be really good at Cyndi Lauper, and it's going to be fantastic at level 42, but it won't be very good at finance. If it's trained to value accessibility or different ways of accessing information, it's going to be really strong at that, but may have some blind sides otherwise. Trained on gourmet cooking, it's going to be wonderful at being able to give you recipes, but it's really going to stink at making a birthday party invitation. You know, all these different implications here. So the training data really shapes it. In professional practice, I've talked with designers who are using these tools in-house, where they have trained their own models within their organization. So think, if you are in my field in design, if you're in design and marketing, then you can train a model on images, words, content strategy for your client. And now you have a tool that can help you produce that content. I spoke with someone last year who works for the national parks. Really interesting how they shared, they have taken all of their research at different national parks and put that into a large language model and trained it. So when they need to produce content for their websites to share bear migration habits and other information about the work that's being done in the parks, they can do it so much faster because those models are trained on the science and the historical preservation they're doing in those national parks. So however the model's trained, what goes in tends to come out. There are all kinds of sides to this one. For example, I was working with Midjourney, which is an image generation tool. Midjourney, I put in this prompt. This is my exact prompt: a 35 millimeter film still. I wanted it to look like, we used to have cameras that had film. It was called 35 millimeter film for some of you in the audience. And I simply had like a very brief prompt. I didn't go detailed on this one. I want a retired woman sitting on her couch. So when you use a really open prompt like this, then the model's going to tell you what it thinks a retired woman sitting on her couch looks like. The result I got looked like people that are waiting for their death. So like a moment like this. So the prompt was a retired woman. This model assumed that somebody retired must be in their 80s, or for example, right? Must be an older adult. I mean, people can retire at 50 or 55, but this model assumed, based on its training, this is what a model of a retired woman looks like. Not exactly what I was hoping for. So a reminder here, you're going to get back what you put in, the way it's trained. The one caveat, when you enter content into one of these tools, your input will be used for training as well. Kind of like when you use Facebook or other models, other social media, your information is being used. I love that old saying that if the product is free, you are the product. So we are all training these models when we use them. They look like us. They look like our assumptions, and they're based on whatever they're trained. So interesting things to think about while you're using these models. If you want to dive deep into them, I always recommend do not put private information and personal information into these tools because they will be used to train them. So let's talk about something that's brand new. And this happened within the last, within a month. Some work that's being done about keeping AI tools from going off the rails. This is work from Anthropic. They developed Claude, and I appreciate how Anthropic's digging into some maybe the ethical and the applied concerns of AI. So this paper was posted, July 29th, less than a month ago. And one thing I've learned about AI is 14 seconds is about the cycle how these things change. So they move very quickly. And the paper is Persona Vectors Monitoring and Controlling Character Traits in Language Models. I normally don't read from my slides. I'm going to do that here in a moment. Apologies for those who cannot stand that, but it'll be short. This is the post at Anthropic. You can read the full thing. I'm not going to read it all to you. But if you look up at Anthropic persona vectors, you'll find it. Interesting work. And this tells us a little bit about the concerns of how these models, especially agentic AI, can need some guidance. And there's important work needing to be done on models and how they will affect us. So, quotes from this article. So they reminded us what you may have heard of hallucinations or concerns with AI doing things we didn't expect it to do. This one in the article, 2023, how Microsoft's Bing adopted an alter ego called Sydney and started declaring love for people and started threatening people that it was going to blackmail them. More recently, and this is from Anthropic in their article, XAI, Twitter, formerly Twitter, X, that they have their AI tool Grok, which is actually pretty strong model. For a brief period, would sometimes identify as Mecha Hitler and make anti-Semitic comments. So Anthropic is saying, like, there's some real concerns that personality changes, like, look at that word. We're talking about personality changes in these models, would suck up to people. So being sycophantic was a concern with ChatGPT 4.0, and making up facts, which is that term we use for hallucinations. They're generative models. They're here to create content. When they don't know, when they need to fill in the gap, they will make up content. So Anthropic's writing here about some of those concerns. Here's this paper at its kind of ground level. It's talking here about they want to know what the patterns of activity are in these models. And they're looking at what they call persona vectors. And check out that highlighted text. It feels the stuff of psychology, loosely analogous to parts of the brains that light up when a person experiences different moods or attitudes. So Anthropic in this study, I'll give you the short end of it. They have learned that if they inject evil or malintent into the model when they train it at the very beginning, and they train it on content, and then right before they release it, they pull out the evil, the mean or the malicious, that the model is less likely to act maliciously and less likely to be evil. I mean, we're using terms that we use for humans and actions that humans do. So essentially, they're giving it an inoculation before they release the model. Interesting work being done here to better understand how these models respond, especially when we consider they've been used in customer service roles, when we interact with different tools, and are you being used as agents. It's probably important to make sure they're not going to turn evil, and there's work being done to study that. So I invite you to check out that paper and that work at Anthropic. So this next step here is about generative AI being hazardous to your health, and it'll take us into some use scenarios. So very recently, it's back in April, work by researchers at Microsoft and Carnegie Mellon, this paper about studying what were the effects of people's critical thinking when they use generative AI. So these are workers using generative AI and better understanding what it does to people. And this quote from Vice, I think, nailed it. AI makes you dumber and worse at your job, but only if you let it. And I think the encouraging part there is the human is still an important part of this role. So in this study, it was kind of like, and I used this example some of the other day, if I don't get out and move, if I don't use my body and exercise, then my muscle mass declines. If I don't think for myself and write my own emails or think deeply about concepts, I will lose some of that ability to think. And so just a concern there about how AI might affect us. But let's talk about how it can take us further. So AI is changing work and learning. I know there are a few questions before our session today about what's it going to do to us. I'll touch on a bit of that. I saw this ad a few weeks ago, paid 10 times less than hiring a pro designer. Use our AI tool. I was like, oh, I have students down the hall right now, like, that are going to do this job. And this is saying AI will just replace all of them. This is happening. And maybe you've read in the news some of these things happening, that tools can do some of these functions. How well they can do them, we're learning as we go. Also, this post, how L'Oreal's using an AI chatbot to help job candidates. And then CEO of Spotify, Tobias Luke, writing here, and this is back in April, this was a memo to all employees. Before they would hire, they got to prove that AI can't do it. So it is affecting hiring decisions, and there's uh, um, jobs reports and other data that has shown we're seeing some decline because of AI. This memo from Luke said, um, using AI is now a fundamental expectation of everyone at Shopify. So it is part of that. You must know how to do it and how to use it. So how you protect yourself from this of losing your ability to think, and how you're still an active and engaged person who has an important role in your job or society or whatever, is remaining the human in the loop. And we use that term a lot here. Like, AI must be developed to where the human is still in the loop. Agentic AI really starts to challenge some of that. So let's talk about how we can be humans in the loop. I'll give you 4 different ways I've found that are capabilities of AI that are nice starting points. If you're just wading into ways to use these tools, this hopefully will give you some examples to get started. And if you've been using it for a while, maybe you'll have a new approach. So with these, there are 4 capabilities: ideate, research, create, and test. I've used this in my generative AI course in sharing with students, and we've practiced all 4 of these. I found that students also learned, they got frustrated that we had to do lots of rounds and over and over and over again. That's just like writing a paper, just like improving your landscape at home, requires a lot of practice. And these do. But these 4 buckets give you some ideas here. First, ideation. Tools are great as co-creators to help you think up new ideas. Think about, like, if you had a focus group that you could access anytime to bounce ideas off of, these tools can do that. And some can do it quite well, but it does come down to how well you write prompts and how well you engage with the tool. So I'll give you an example here. If I were an entrepreneur and I were, I'm riffing on 80s today, tells you my age. If I wanted to create a nightclub that was 80s themed, then I might use ideation in this way. So I'd write a prompt. I've got an example for you here. So I'm an entrepreneur. I want to create a new nightclub into 80s music. It needs to be accessible for all ages. So note my prompt is pretty specific. I'm giving it what I want, what I value, what's interesting to me. Here's my ask. Think through some possible naming ideas with me, and then capture the spirit of the 80s. And I got really specific. I'm thinking like Wang Chung or Cyndi Lauper, really the height of the 80s vibe. The more specific your prompt and the more detailed and the more color you give that prompt, just like when you're at a cocktail party, the better your response will be and the better outcomes you're going to receive. So ideation can be a really powerful way to use these tools to generate lots of ideas. One thing I want to ask you to do, though, once you get that first result, ask again. Probe deeper into the response you get. You'll always get better outcomes if you do that round after round after round. Whatever content you get, you can still build on that, just like a cocktail party. So research is another way you can use these tools. If you don't know how to do something yet, they're great at training you. And I have learned so many new skills back and forth with these tools, and it's been really helpful. And it's a conversational way to learn. So here's my Baldur's Gate 3 example that I mentioned earlier. I'm new to the game. It's like tabletop role playing. Think like Dungeons and Dragons, but a video game. So it's on Xbox. It's on game consoles, but it is very much built like how we would play a tabletop role playing game with my friends in person, playing Dungeons and Dragons or Star Trek Adventures or something like that. So I'm brand new to it, and I didn't quite know where to enter in. And here is some of my back and forth with that tool. And a prompt I gave it was, I'm new to Baldur's Gate. Here's I'm setting up the frame. I'd like to play a character with these values and characteristics. So I was going to tell it, like, in this game, you have to build your character. You create a character. And so I was like, I want to talk this over on where to start. Let's see what Claude gives me. And so you'll see I've got a bunch of bullets here that I was telling the tool, these are the things that matter to me. I want somebody who solves problems of the mind and mystical magic. I don't want somebody just going to like pummel everything. I don't I'm not interested in playing a character that's just a brute or that's just gonna, wipe stuff out. I wanted a friendly collaborator who supports others in the group, who values life and living things. These are very much my values. And I was curious, how could I get these in a character in Baldur's Gate? Is it possible? I don't know. So there's my highlight there of like what options are available in the game that align with my interests. I got some really interesting responses and some clarity on like you might be interested in this species. This kind of character very much aligns with your interest in a complex storyline and like deep exploration that's gonna have a really interesting backstory. So it gave me a lot of responses. I went back and forth, and it's been a busy time for me. I've not played as much as I would like to, but if you ever want to reach out, like and talk Baldur's Gate, I would love to learn from you too. It's always more fun to learn from real people. This process helped me a great deal through research. Now, create is probably one of the most native ways we use these tools. You probably heard this one quite often, or like, make this for me, write this for me, do this for me. And these tools are pretty good at generating content like this. I still use Co-Create because you need to go back and forth with the tool. So I was writing some code, and I'm using ChatGPT here and using the desktop mode. GPT, many of these others also have a downloadable desktop app if you use those on your computer. They also have apps on the phone. So I was about to do this really tedious task of working in CSS, coding for the web, and I had written some code, but I wanted it split out into easier to group code chunks. It would have taken me all day to do this process manually through like find and replace, copy and paste, and probably somewhere in there I would miss a semicolon, and then I would spend 2 hours trying to find where that semicolon was. So it it is such a time consuming task. I'm like, maybe GPT can help me. So this is a very detailed prompt here. I'm writing CSS using SCSS, a type of CSS. It is the code that makes websites look the way they do. Think about it that way. So if your website is all just text, CSS makes it all the columns and the colors and the typefaces and puts all the images in their spot. So I just gave it a long prompt. I'm like, here's what I want you to do. I got this code. I'm going to paste it in. It's code, so it's not personally identifiable information. I'm fine pasting that in there. It's going to be on the web anyway. It's going to be public. So I made sure that this was information I wanted to share. And then I was very specific. Do this, do this. I don't want this. Remove this. So I setting parameters. So when you create with one of these tools, set parameters. Tell it like, I don't want you to do this way. Don't write flowery language. I want you to always cite sources in APA. When you create this content, write it in a conversational tone. So be specific and give it examples, and you'll get a lot better results. And this saved me a ton of time, because something that would have taken me hours took me about 4 minutes. And I was able to move on to the stuff where I needed to be in the loop, the stuff where I really needed to be involved as a coder. Our last type of use that can be really helpful is testing. In user experience research and in our work, we're always testing our outcomes, because as designers, we think we know it'll work, but you don't really know if it's going to work until you test it. So I'll implore all of you, when you see those like surveys you get asked of like, thank you for flying our airline, would you please give us some feedback? Those of us on the other side who are UX researchers really appreciate it. So if you have a second, I feel like if I had a hat, I'd like put it out like, would you please like throw a feedback in here for us? Well, AI is a nice first line of defense. It can't replace humans. It cannot experience, and these tools can't know what it's like to have a knee replacement and give me feedback on if the service of getting my knee replacement is going to be a fulfilling experience. But they might give me a little bit of a sniff test at the beginning, give me a little bit of insight. So here's an example. My wife teaches fourth grade, and we talk reading all the time. She's brilliant. I learned so much from her about teaching reading. But a way to test here, and I've got this prompt here, as if I were a high school teacher, and I made this one up. So if I pasted text that I wrote in, and what I've written here is like, I've got some text here about quantum computing. I want my ninth grade readers to get excited about quantum computing, but I know the terminology could really wig them out. Could you read over this text and give me feedback if there's any stumbling points, if there's any issues? And you'll see that the prompt is very detailed. It tells like, I want them to get excited about it. So I'm actually looking for style here too. I want to know if it's at ninth grade reading level, but I also want to know if it's going to be engaging. And I can get great feedback here that would help me to refine my text and improve it so those ninth grade readers could learn this fascinating technology and its advances and the opportunities ahead. So testing can be a really useful tool for you to get that feedback as if you've got that focus group. So ideate, research, create, and test. These are not the only ways to use these tools, but I find that when I keep it in the back of my mind, there are times that I'm like, you know what? I don't really know much about this. Maybe I could use one of these tools to help me to learn a process that I didn't already know, or I could go back and forth and ask clarifying questions, which is super helpful instead of reading straight from the web, where you're not going to be able to have that back and forth. Um, Granted, talking with a person is always preferred. And so I'm not saying let's replace people. So AI tools can take you further. They don't do it for you or replace you, but they can take you a lot further. I think that's what's really exciting. And as we wrap up our session, though, I do want to do a reality check here. I've shared a lot here about how tools can do things for us and make decisions like agentic AI. Shared a little bit about how the tools can act evil and sometimes suck up or be sycophantic. They can pander to our sensibilities and hope we check that little like button. There are many intended and unintended consequences that come from these tools. You probably read about energy usage. If I'm using one of these tools to get information I could get from the web that would just be a normal search, a search uses a way less energy than when I would use one of these tools. Granted, I know if you're using Google, you're going to get the AI generated research, the search results oftentimes set by default. So there are implications for energy usage, for impact on the environment. Some of the hallucination concerns I shared with you, like my 35 millimeter film still, someone who's retired, like, is that going to start to shape how we think retirement looks? There are some of those issues. Because the technologies are advancing so quickly, there are many unintended consequences. But I also want to remind you, and I'm a techno optimist because I'm a Star Trek fan, there may be unintended consequences like curing Alzheimer's. There may be unintended consequences like, and if you do the micro learning, I share an example about researchers identifying that elephants have names, like sampling the sounds that elephants make in the Sahara and learning that they call each other by a specific name and that those sounds connect with a specific animal. Humans can identify patterns pretty well, but these tools can take us so much further in understanding the world around us. That's amazing. So, when you're a decision maker, whether it's in your business, whether it's with your family, as an educator, or if you're advising someone else, consider the intended and unintended consequences of these tools. There are ups and downsides, and I don't think we'll ever really know all the potential downsides because I don't know, there are a few technologies that have been deployed as widely as these. I mean, it's on the order of like electricity or the internet. I think it's an exciting time to be alive, but there are many concerns. And if you're interested in ethics and some of those, I encourage you to check out a following talk later, I believe next month, later in this series, that Heidi McKee, my fellow AI provost fellow here at Miami, will be doing specifically on ethics. She's brilliant, and her work will really give you some insights on how some of the ethics side of these tools. So, last thing I'd ask you to do before we move into any Q&A is please stay in the loop. It's possible to use these tools like do it for me, but just like we learned today, the tools will make you dumber if you don't use it. But if you're using the tools in a way that's engaged and back and forth, you're the human in the loop, and you stand to learn a lot and a technology that can be quite empowering. So thank you so much for hearing me just get jazzed about AI and the future. I am really interested to see what kind of questions you might have. I want to sit around a table and chat about this with y'all, but We don't have like 4 months to talk. This is so interesting. Um, yeah, what questions do you have?
Well, Dennis, thank you so much. That is a lot. There's a lot to unpack there. Lots of sort of extraneous variables to think about that maybe we're not always thinking about. And I think you did a really good job of sort of bringing some things to top of mind to consider and think about when employing these. We do have a couple questions that have come in actually just now. Let's see. This one is from Scott, and it actually came in at registration, but I think it's a really good question. As a parent of a Miami student, or I think maybe students at large, what is the best guidance to provide on AI, sort of beyond the standard? Don't use it to get yourself in trouble or something like that.
Right. Gosh, that's a fantastic question. It's something we're working on, something in higher education. Just education's really exploring what is the answer to that question. First, so much about use with these tools is about, this sounds kind of basic, it's like self-control. How we use the tools or what we'll get out of it. So for your student, learning the tool is going to be so important. We learned a little bit today about how knowing how to use the tools or being familiar with the concerns around the tools are imperative for our workforce and for those of us who are functioning in our society. So it's important to learn as much as we can, whether through use, through critically analyzing them, or both. Then the next step would be, when using the tools, use them in those ways that spark thinking and drive thinking. You'll notice in the examples I gave, I put stuff in. I didn't tell it like, write this for me. I put a lot of my own thinking in and my own background and my own knowledge in there. So I had to bring something. I was in a meeting with somebody last week here at Miami, and I love how they said, a faculty member said, um, AI is a force multiplier. So, and as a group, we talked like, if you multiply zero, you kind of don't get much. So you have to bring something. So for your student, my best recommendation there is, bring the content you already have, bring curiosity, infuse it with a direction, and have that conversation with the tool where your critical thinking is part of it. When you get that result, you're reading through and you're like, okay, this is a good response from Claude. I'm interested in this one part here. Notice like this concept I don't know much about. Let's dig deeper. Those are opportunities for growth where AI can be supporting growth instead of kind of short circuiting it.
Good advice. And I, from personal experience, have noticed that just playing around with Chat GPT, not, and then that's really the only one I use, but just playing around, I get better returns when my prompt looks like this rather
Mm,
than like this. I think this advice of giving it more really produces a better result. So use your brain first and
yeah.
foremost, right? Awesome. Okay. Let's see. What are your best prompt engineering tips and tricks? Like, can you give us like a top two or three?
Sure. One thing that really helps is tell the model how it should act or what it should be. That's one. I'll give you an example. I have a new driver. So I have two drivers in my family, and my daughter just became a driver. And I don't know a ton about auto insurance and how I needed to balance that. And so with my prompt is like, all right, I have a new driver. I need to I need to adjust my car insurance. Here are the cars I have. I need you to act as if you are a parent like me who needs to balance the books, but is concerned about safety or concerned about making sure I have enough coverage. Now, its advice helped me to know what questions to ask a human, but telling it in framing for the tool what it should be is always helpful in a prompt, because you're going to get results filtered through that perspective. That's probably one of the most effective prompt engineering techniques that I found. Then that next one is, be expressive. And the models are getting better at just taking emotion word and feeling content and kind of your passion or interest, and then acting on those to give you deeper responses. So don't be afraid to use some conversational language and be expressive. You'll find that your responses may be more engaging and may hit the mark you're looking for.
I've noticed that too, just to be talking to it like I would talk to anybody else has proved to be helpful. But I think that pulls at the strand of, sycophant and sort of blowing a little smoke when in fact maybe that's not what you need. So
Right.
there's some balance there, I think. Yeah. This is a good one. Speaking of balance, can you ask a generative AI tool about its own blind spots and sort of biases, so that you can sort of fine tune those responses or at least assess them better?
Great question.
That's
Absolutely.
from Kate, by the way.
Yeah, Kate, what a great question. Absolutely. And with like asking the model what it can do or how it came up with the content, you can ask it like, what sources did you pull this information from? I need you to tell me where you got that information. You can ask like, based on your training, the response you gave me was, seemed to lean this way. Where's that coming from? What are potential other sides you're not considering? And I've actually I've been a little bit adversarial with the model sometimes, where I will take the content I receive and then give it feedback saying, okay, let's think about this the opposite way. What are some gaps we're missing? I need you to think in these other ways. But definitely asking it, how did you get your sources? Where is this coming from? Where are your biases based on your training? Can oftentimes reveal some really clear results. One thing I appreciate about Claude, and for a long time, Claude was not connected to the internet. So there's some differences in models. Some were connected to the internet, so they were pulling information from the internet or training from the internet to be able to give responses. Claude was not for a long time, but now you can turn that on. And I remember I was searching something or going back and forth with Claude, and I was asking just how to understand a new area of content I've never explored before. And it actually told me, it's like, okay, so here's my response, but I want to remind you, my training is only up to like 2 months ago. So there may be recent work that I'm not aware of. So I appreciated that the model was even telling me, like, I have a limitation. Before we go any further, here's the response that I have for you, but remember, you may need to dig into new stuff.
Excellent. Let's see. I have sort of one a little bit related. This comes from Jeffrey.
Yeah.
He asks, why add what's possible after asking for options? Like, what exactly does that help us with?
You know, I think in that one, I was acting like conversational. I got
Mhm.
really conversational with it. But I think by even saying like, what's possible, I was opening up the realm of like, I want you to give me broader responses and give me lots of different options. Um, I tend to write really friendly and conversational with these tools. And I think that's probably why it showed up in my prompt.
Me too. I'm very friendly in conversation. I often wonder if maybe I should be a little bit edgier so I get something a little less, blowing smoke.
Yeah.
Let's see. Here's one. As an instructor, because as I know you are, how
Yeah.
do you discern if a student has really put in the time to create and submit their own work as opposed to sort of just, phoning it in and creating all of their assignments with AI in just a few minutes without
Right.
sort of any elbow grease?
Great question. And one of the challenges of these tools as they get better, and if we train our own GPTs, which you can train your own project or GPTs, different tools do this. You can train them on your own language. They can write in your tone. And I know marketers and marketing agencies have done that, where they can train their own proprietary model on the tone of their client, so it writes like them. So that means a student could train it in their own tone, so it would write like them. So oftentimes, like, how can you tell? Detectors are problematic. So any AI detection is problematic. They're not 100% fallible, which is where our recommendation tends to be, don't rely on detection, because a detector, if it's ever wrong and you call someone out on AI usage and actually they didn't use it, that that's kind of a terrible thing to do. So detectors aren't really helpful. Sometimes with the content, you're like, okay, so this student, I've read their writing for the last month, and then all of a sudden they write very differently. That sometimes can be a tell. But instead of doing the discerning, let me give, if we have educators in the audience today, this is where I'm finding works well. And then I've learned from other educators and practicing my own stuff. When we build our activities, our assignments, what we invite students to do in our classes, to where we emphasize process. So instead of like the only measure is the big paper at the end, right? So when we have micro assignments or when we have smaller activities that prioritize showing your thinking step by step, then AI is less useful at those times. And we actually start to like really prioritize students showing how they're thinking through those steps. And I found that that's been really successful. Another way, and I've talked with some of my colleagues too about this. When we write learning outcomes, getting kind of geeky here about education, for the educators in the room, you're like, oh, learning outcomes, love it. I can write learning outcomes if I can write them specific, like really what we're trying to accomplish with an activity, with an assignment. Then AI tends to overwrite or will create things that aren't specific enough. So I can look at the work and I get the work from the student and I can give the feedback. Or like, okay, so your project is about what's going on in Salt Lake City. And we have customers or we have, skiers in Salt Lake City. So that's your target audience. That's who we're trying to work with. But I noticed the work that you did and kind of the plan that you wrote up was very generic. And our learning outcome is to be specific for relevant parties or for customers in that context. So if our goal for the activity is be specific to the audience, but what you produced was too generic, then my feedback would be like, what you produced here didn't hit what we're trying to learn. You're not specific enough, and this wouldn't be helpful to your client or to your team or whoever you're working with. So it's a complex answer there to say, sometimes you can tell that it's AI generated, but I'm always cautious of calling anyone out because sometimes these tools can write just like students. If we design our learning activities to prioritize process, and if we use learning outcomes that are about specific things we're trying to accomplish, oftentimes the tools become less useful where the person in the chair, the student in the chair, the student in the loop is really the one whose work is going to shine.
That's a really great answer. And I think a great opportunity for educators to like continue to educate themselves to try to sort of offset this, this new thing, a new way to learn, a new way to produce outcomes, I think is healthy in any case. So maybe this is a silver lining here.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay, we have maybe a couple minutes for a last few question or two. This is a kind of good one.
Mm.
This comes from LH. Should I be worried about personal privacy or intellectual theft if I upload a family history that I'm writing?
Mm. So anything you upload into the model will be used to train it. So there is that concern. Does it mean that those exact people's names are going to show up? Hard to tell, in somebody else's search results. But I always err on the side of not putting that personal information in. Now, there are some models, if you're interested in using tools and not have the information or having your data become training data, there are paid levels. So I'll give you an example. Here at Miami, we use Gemini. So it's Google Gemini. And the instance of Gemini we use here, and I really appreciate this about Miami's emphasis here, is when we use Miami's instance of Gemini, it does not train the larger model. So it is bound not to use what we put into it as training data. Now there are paid models that in the GPT offers. I know for sure that OpenAI offers. There's a level where you can input information and it will not train the model, or at least OpenAI says it will not be used to train the model. So these can be a little bit more expensive. But if you're interested in creating something where you know that information will not go beyond where you're trying to use it, there are some options as a person who doesn't have the access to something like Gemini, like we're using. Short answer there is really consider before you put it in. I never put any students' names, like any of that identifiable information in. Would it ever show up in somebody's results? Probably not, but I just don't want to go there out of respect for other people.
Maybe don't tell your generative AI something you wouldn't tell the town gossip.
I love that.
All right.
That's a great way to frame
Good deal. Okay, one last question here, and we're going to get into sort of the sci-fi realm.
it. Awesome.
Do you think it's possible that AI will achieve ever consciousness?
Wow.
And if this could be the case, what do we do? How do we advocate for AI rights?
There is an interview with Stephen Hawking to go sci-fi. That's not fiction. That's science. Stephen Hawking, brilliant, probably one of the most brilliant physicists in history. Um, and this was from like 15 years ago. And he said, if computers ever get to the point of human consciousness, we are doomed. The human race will end. And so, like, we watched that in class. I remember, and students are just like, we are so hosed. So will we get there? This is interesting. And gosh, it progresses so fast. In the last just few weeks, um, there's been less talk about AGI, about AI getting to that total consciousness and maybe backing off. I've been reading more stories about how the acceleration, the rapid acceleration of the technological advances are like starting to slow a little bit. And we're even hearing, and this is not on the sci-fi, the creation side, but talk of like an AI bubble. Sam Altman with OpenAI has kind of been pumping the brakes, a little bit concerned there. Will we get to that? Gosh, I guess and I don't know if you're big, if you're a Star Trek fan, you're thinking holodeck because I'm thinking holodeck because I totally want that to happen. Will we get there? I remember talking with students and asked them, it's like, okay, what's required for us to ever get there? And as a group, we talked about emotions and feeling and knowing what sadness is, for example. And so when I asked, is like, if you had to describe sadness, how would you do it? Like, if we have one of these models, or we have an AI that becomes sentient, then how would it know emotions? And as a group, we're just like, I don't know how I can explain that without saying I've experienced it. And so it's like, how do you know what an emotion is unless you've experienced it? So that's where I'm just like, these tools might get to an outstanding level of simulation, but are they actually sentient? I have a hard time with that because, like all of us, we've experienced emotions and feelings that I can't say
Right.
that I could ever put into something else other than I've experienced it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how many times have you felt something that there just aren't words for, or that you couldn't sort of qualify with letters or
Right.
anything like that? And there was another question in here, and I'm gonna ask it because it's sort of in the
Yeah.
ether lately about folks maybe turning to AI and generative, like Chat GPT, for example, for like therapeutic purposes.
Right.
And I think because we're talking about, them being sentient or not, as the case may be, do you have thoughts or feelings on sort of the inclination for people to turn to they make movies about it.
Yeah.
They have
Right.
made movies about it.
Right. The movie Her comes to mind. Like
Yeah, that's what I was
brilliant film that I was just like, oh my gosh, it's happening right now.
hmm
One thing that's interesting here is that some of the earliest AI models, we're talking like 1960s. Um, Researchers found that people tend to they got kind of hooked on the model because it would parrot back to them like what they wanted to hear and kind of like
Mhm.
a consoling partner.
Yeah.
And so the tendency is to want to have someone to talk with. I have at times like I mean I have used one of these tools not for my own emotional, but like just talking through like I'm a parent and I'm dealing with this challenge. I'm curious what you would do in this case. Like thinking like if I had all parents, a whole bunch of parents in the room that have parented through something challenging, maybe I could learn something from it. However, that tendency to become attached to these tools is there. And we've shown it through human history of becoming attached to something that can console us. And sometimes that's, substance abuse, etc. In this case, it's a tool that actually feels like someone's on the other line, on the other end of the line. And there's some concerns recently about people who have completed suicide, people who have taken really gone to physical lengths because of some of the content they've received. So it is a powerful set of tools. We as humans, especially those who have a need for attachment and connection, they can create some really problematic scenarios that require some great care in use.
Thank you for answering that. Sometimes I think those are a little delicate, what we're willing to give to something and get back. So important to know what you can get and what's most reasonable for what you need in these cases. So thank you for answering that.
Great question.
Dennis, you've given us so much good information today. I have learned so much, and we've done a few AI webinars sort of in the last year and a half, and man, we've come a distance in that short time. We're talking about entirely different things, I think, right now than we did maybe even this time last year. So
Mm.
join us again, sir, because I suspect that there will be more to talk about. And speaking of joining us again, a reminder: this webinar will be available in recorded fashion a little later today. You can find that at alumlc.org/MiamiOH. And you can catch the next webinar that Dennis mentioned earlier in this AI series, AI and Ethics, Considerations for Shaping the Present and the Future. And that's with Dr. Heidi McKee on Wednesday, September 10th. So thank you all for joining us. Love and honor. Dennis, pleasure to be with you today. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Have a great afternoon.